Oceanographic website. And we're gonna start with Molly giving us a brief introduction into the purpose of the meeting, and then we're gonna go into the pre-field season coordination when Bob Foy is gonna tell us about planned cruises and changes in nymphs, and then I'm gonna call out some PIs that provided some slides for their planned cruises and status updates. So with that, I'm gonna start recording and give it over to Molly.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anne Christine. Well, I want to welcome everybody to this meeting today. You can tell by all the people participating that there's a lot of interest in this topic. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This is, for those of you new to IARPC, this is an IARPC sponsored call, which is the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. And it is co-hosted by the Environmental Intelligence Collaboration Team, and that's myself, Roberto Delgado from National Science Foundation, and Candace Nachman from NOAA. Also from the Marine Ecosystems Team, which is led by Jackie Grebmeyer and Danielle Dixon, and then also by the Arctic Field Operations Working Group, which is Renee Crane's group at NSF. So we're doing this jointly as a call here. The primary goal, this was an effort that was actually initiated 2 years ago. We've done 2 years of these. This would be our third call. And the effort at that time was to get all of the science leads from all of the research cruises going into the Bering, Chukchi, Beaufort seas together to talk about their research plans, to engage with each other, to see if there were additional opportunities for maybe some additional sampling, to assist others who might not be on the cruise, to share if there was additional space for another grad student or postdoc, or really to kind of share that science piece of it. That was the original goal of this meeting. We thought, great, we're going to get all of these folks together and we're going to talk about this again and really see how we can make this year's field season even more robust. Well, as all of you know, things have changed dramatically, and so we do have a revised goal for the meeting now, and it's mainly to talk with all of you about your revised plans. Are your cruises canceled? Are they delayed? Are they changed in some way? Do you have contingency plans for these, that they'll happen later in the year, that you plan now to do them in 2021? We want to talk about that, and then also talk about if in lieu of those cruises and those research activities, are there additional activities that the research community could be doing to provide more answers to those who want to know what's going on with rapid change in the Bering Sea? So that's kind of our revised goal. And as we hear from the research community as to what the plans are and how those plans have changed, we really want all of you in the science community to think about what other activities we all could be doing to enhance our knowledge. Is this a new opportunity to look at things from maybe a different perspective and ask new questions or additional questions? So that's really, it's a challenge to the research community to respond to what we are really seeing as unprecedented times. So with that, I would like to ask if the marine ecosystem, if Jackie, if you'd like to say anything, or Renee, anything in addition before we get started kind of in the substance of the meeting?
This is Jackie. I would just say I know of cruises that are being canceled this week and other cruises that are still pending but uncertain. So it's going to be a moving object on this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be informative for this presentation. And that's about all I can say at this point. As far as activities, depends on, if your core field work, you can always do retrospective analysis. There's no shortage of data to do that part, just that you won't be able to track change.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anything from Renee? I don't. Is Renee on? She should be. but I don't hear. So, okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Anne, did you want to go through and start this now?
Sure. So we're going to start with Bob Foy. Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to share the presentation that you sent me?
Yeah, why don't I go ahead and share my screen? And you should see it coming now.
Yes.
Okay, you see the full screen there?
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much, Molly, and those that have put this together. It's a great opportunity for scientists to talk about field seasons, and I very much appreciate the intent of this meeting, which is to see how we can better collaborate. And I can't think of a better year to need something like this. And really, Molly, I appreciate you, thinking about this as an opportunity because it certainly has been for us to rethink how we collect data, what we collect. It's actually providing a couple of opportunities for us to test some additional ways of collecting data that we don't know how they compare to more traditional methods. So I'll mention those briefly, but it has certainly stirred things up. We've got a lot of different research projects going on. I'm going to be extremely brief here so that we can get to the rest of the researchers on the call. And I'm going to be focusing on National Marine Fisheries Service surveys out of the Alaska Fisheries Science Center. And I'm going to preface this. There's a couple of surveys in here that you're going to hear repeated by other principal investigators on this call because we already collaborate on some of these. So we've got scientists that are involved in these surveys, and I'm going to just try to highlight the data that we would collect on these other surveys so that it points out who might be a point of contact in terms of asking questions or getting data. And I guess one more caveat here, I appreciate the organizers' patience with us and the National Marine Fisheries Service. The reason I'm giving this presentation instead of the principal investigators is just because of the situation we're in right now. It's a very uncomfortable time for us in terms of making decisions. Federal organizations are being careful about our communication of the decisions that are being made, making sure that we're aware of a larger national perspective as regional decisions such as in Alaska are being made. So it's a little easier for me to provide this presentation because, as Jackie just said, things are changing. There's actually a change to this talk this morning. It's a moving target. So again, I'm going to go pretty quickly through all of this. There's about 13 or 14 slides covering our surveys that are typically planned in 2020. The first two slides are overviews, and then I'll get into the details. So what you can see here are the dates on the left-hand side, the platform in the middle, and then the activity. My goal right now is just to highlight that we've got surveys that started in March 28th. You'll see they go all the way through the fall. The platforms include the NOAA vessel, Oscar Dyson, NOAA aircraft, charter vessels that we use for some of our bottom trawl surveys. We collaborate on the U.S. Coast Guard icebreaker Healy and participate in that survey. And again, I'll get into the details on the activities here in a moment. This is the second slide, additional charter vessels. There's more NOAA vessels that are coming into Alaska later in the fall in the fair weather that we've got research projects in coordination with others that are also on this call, and then additional charters towards the end of the year. That just kind of gives an overview of everything that we're participating in. And I'm not going to read this to you, I promise, but this was the only official guidance that has come out or directive that has come out from NOAA at this point, and that was identifying, and this came out at the beginning of April, for identifying that we had officially canceled all of the NOAA ship and aerial based surveys for the month of March and April. And basically the statement just says that we're building out scenarios and considering how to address all of our surveys moving forward. So I'm going to run through all of these surveys now. These all match one of the surveys in the first two slides in case you want to use the slide deck. This was a survey originally planned for March 28th. This is going out and looking at our ice seals. This is attaching satellite tracking tags, identifying health and condition of a number of different ice seal species. This is critical for us because of the changes in sea ice that we've been experiencing the last handful of years in Alaska. So unfortunately, this is tied to the Oscar Dyson. We did cancel the survey. We considered whether we could collect some of these data in other ways. It was really too late for us to stand anything up. It can't be collected later in the year because they're very specifically tied to the ice. We're remaining in contact with local communities to hear what they're seeing in terms of the distribution of ice and distribution of animals. Of course, that's not going to have the scientific rigor attached to it, but it does help us understand how this year may have played out for sea ice and animals. It's unfortunate because this is an in-between year with sea ice. We have, as most folks know, we had a massive reduction in sea ice in the last couple of years. The sea ice extent returned at 1 or 2 points early in the year back to an average. More recent weeks, it has shrunk back to probably being 3rd or 4th lowest on record. And while it was, the extent was deeper into the Bering Sea, the thickness of the ice and the type of ice really wasn't what we're used to. There's a lot of heat in the water that prevented some of that ice to form, and that affects the ability of the marine mammals to use that ice and their survival, etc. So I'll move on from that and expect that there might be questions on that survey. I'm moving on. This is our aerial survey for marine mammals on the northern coast. This is not an annual survey. We do this one, we try to do it every 5 years at least in order to establish baselines for our ice seal abundances and biomass. We use a number of different tools and techniques that continue to evolve to complete these abundance estimates. And you can see that it covers the whole north coast of Alaska here. And we've also developed a number of partnerships with Department of Interior, with the state of Alaska, and with science agencies in Canada as well to tie these surveys into other species such as polar bears and crossing that international boundary. This was also canceled. Again, it's tied to the NOAA airplanes and efforts that had to be canceled in early April. We considered whether or not this could be extended later in the year, but really, again, it's tied to ice. If we had been able to get airplanes up and running in this month, we probably could have been able to conduct some of the aerial surveys, but it really isn't worth it to go out there for 3 or 4 days. So what we're going to do is postpone this till next year. Again, like I said, this is only happens every 5 years or so. So this is already on our planning schedule for 2021. And hopefully we're able to pick up our abundance estimates at that point. Moving on to our oceanographic and our zooplankton mooring surveys, also scheduled to be on the Oscar Dyson at the end of April, beginning of May. And then there's also a secondary survey here to achieve these goals that goes out in the fall, in September. The early spring part of this survey has been canceled. Again, this is a timing event where we're tying physical variables to biological variables, so postponing didn't make any sense. We are working on other alternatives, so alternative data collections on water column, physical properties during our fisheries surveys. We're going to try and see how many CTDs we can get out on our surveys. We're working with the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory on some additional tools to collect as much water column data as we can that we missed during this original survey. And this is a collaborative survey between OAR and NIMS, Pacific Marine Environmental Lab, and the FSC. We will miss the zooplankton work. We won't be able to achieve the lower trophic level data collections that we would have collected at this time. In terms of the September survey, for now, it is still being planned and on schedule. It is likely that as surveys are delayed, there's the potential for a domino effect in the projects that are conducted by a single vessel such as the Oscar Dyson. So right now we're working with our partners to identify just what our collective priorities are in moving forward and just in thinking through how we achieve those goals. And to Molly's question and point earlier, what can we do to identify the need? I would say at this point, to those working in the marine world, just thinking about the ability to collect three-dimensional data in the water column on oceanography is important and going to be lacking this year. So we'll be looking for partners there. At the same time, I should have said this at the beginning, I'm assuming that folks are going to think about these surveys as potential resources once we get them up and running, because they are not going to be conducting their normal missions this year. I don't think anything we do, even if we start up next month, is going to conduct its normal mission. We are going to shake it up and catch our priorities throughout the year. So think outside the box when you're thinking about what you need. I'm going to try and go a little faster here in the interest of time. So larval fish survey in southeastern Bering Sea, that is conducted in the same time frame of mid-May. That is critical for our stock assessments and an early assessment of what the larvae look like for some key commercial fishing species. That has been canceled. Again, that is time specific related to the biological timing. If we went late, we'd have to use different nets, and it would have a different effect on the indices in our stock assessment programs. Moving down, this is same time period. This is also on the Oscar Dyson, May 14th, 29. This is also canceled, and this is our integrated ecosystem survey. These are data collected in concert with those larval data from the previous slide, where we're relating oceanography to distribution, abundance of fishes, seabirds, marine mammals, etc., full ecosystem perspective. We're going to sorely miss these data from this time period. It's collected at a time of initial production in the system, and we use some of these variables as indicators in our stock assessment. So again, right now we're trying to determine which of these variables we could collect later in the year and still have any value. But timing-wise, we're not able to stand this one up. Okay, so getting a little further in the year, so I don't have to have the word cancel on this slide. I'm happy about that. This is our bottom trawl survey in the Bering Sea. This forms the basis for all of our stock assessments. This is huge. There's a massive economic engine that depends on this. Coastal communities depend on the data coming off this survey. It's huge, needless to say. So right now we are postponing this survey by 20 days, and that is so that we can deal with some of the logistical constraints that we have right now in standing the survey up and getting many people and gear, et cetera, to Alaska. So right now we're still planning for that 20-day delay, and with that delay, we're coming up with how we will address the delay, the 20 days, and our planning is either to extend the survey or to focus in on key areas. So this is the harmful algal bloom survey. So we don't lead this survey, but we have people that participate in this survey. I'm going to leave discussion on the Healy to others on the call. There's been some traffic of late, and I'm sure folks at NSF and Jackie and others probably have a better update on the current status of the Healy, so I'm going to leave this one out. But we do have staff that are collecting lower trophic level data during this survey when it goes. This is a late July, early August participation in this survey. And we're expecting that if it were to go and in the discussions as to any changes that are made, that will be part of those discussions. Northern Bering Sea Survey. So this is conducted with the same charter vessels as the previous two bottom trawl surveys that I mentioned. So there's a number of scenarios right now with the delays that are going to occur in those two surveys. Do we not do some of this region, or do we try to spread our effort out amongst the two different regions? I could go on for about 2 or 3 hours on the various efforts that we're looking at right now to assess the implications of not doing this region. There's a very real possibility that we're not in the Northern Bering Sea this year. But again, we're looking to see whether or not we can reduce our effort down south and move into the Northern Bering Sea. There's critical information on the movement of some fish stocks here. So we'll be looking for partnerships. If we don't go, and if we do go, we might provide a platform for folks that aren't able to get into this region this year. And this survey starts in August. Moving down the line, so the NOAA vessel, research vessel Fairweather, will be in Alaskan waters later in the year. That planning still continues right now. Our expectation is that's still moving forward. Others on this call might have additional information as well. And as I said with the previous efforts, we participate as a collaborator on this for some of the multi-trophic level and oceanographic data collection in the region of the straits and further up through the edge of the Beaufort. Our goals here are mostly tying in with the data being collected from a number of sites and sources, the DVOs, et cetera, on climate observing. Northern Bering Sea Survey, this is on the Northwest Explorer, so this is a charter vessel. Right now we're moving forward with the planning for this survey. The data that come off this are not only critical, as you'll see in the next slide, for ecosystem data collection, but also in particular for salmon assessments in the state of Alaska. So right now this is planned for the end of August. It is on a charter vessel, and we'll continue to move forward with planning on this survey. In addition to focusing on midwater and surface fishes, juvenile fishes for salmon, we're also incorporating ecosystem assessments, seabirds, marine mammals, et cetera. So this is it's a PMEL-led survey, mooring survey towards the end of the year that we also look at whale acoustics. We've got a number of sites with passive acoustic listening gear in concert with moorings of PMEL. So we'll be piggybacking on both the Fairweather and the Oscar Dyson cruises as we can in order to service the moorings, collect additional data associated with whale monitoring. And this happens on a number of different surveys throughout the year. So this is not unique. This slide is not unique in terms of a vessel of opportunity for anyone on this call, but it's an additional data collection. And the potential for us not to be able to service some of these listening devices. And again, the potential for looking for some collaboration in doing that, either with a charter at the end of the year or on one of the NOAA vessels, if and when they get up and running again. So that's the end of my presentation, and pretty much covers what the Alaska Fisheries Science Center is focused on in the field this year. And I stopped sharing. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, just in terms of time, I'm going to switch over to the other PIs that are going to present, and I'm going to share my screen and then call out PIs to talk to their representative slides. All right. Can you all see the slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, we're going to start with Jackie, and just let me know whenever you want me to advance.
Sure. Okay, great. I don't have to share it. You could go on. I'm just going to briefly, it's not all the cruises going to the Pacific Arctic sector, but the Distributed Biological Observatory, EcoFOCI, and a few of the internationals. Next. So on this one, we are the Canada's Three Oceans, and the DBO program is set to from the 4th to the 24th, and actually it would be the 31st to leave Victoria, well, actually July 1. It would be Victoria to up to Utqiagvik or alternatives. Right now, it's still in the planning stage. We're submitting all our security forms. There are some potential limitations that haven't been decided upon by the Canadians. First of all, we can't fly there right now, but you still have to plan these things. We would board in Victoria and proceed, and whether or not we get off in Utqiagvik or continue on and get off at a Canadian site is uncertain. But so there's uncertainty that has come up this week on who can participate, how many can participate. But in the meantime, we're going forward with all the security clearances for the US component for that. So the plan would be to cover a lot of, you can see on there, typical things. We do a standard DBO, water, nutrients, phytoplankton, zooplankton, macrofauna, marine mammals, and seabird surveys. Next. The second one is the one that Bob was mentioning for the EcoFOCI DBO cruise that is still in the going forward stage, the 5th to the 27th, perhaps boarding in Kodiak instead of Nome, offload in Nome, not certain. So we have to have these continued discussions, but it would potentially add some additional ship time on it. But right now, we're working on medical forms. We've got permission to order from our institution and go forward. And most of the equipment is all sitting in PMEL. This would include looking at turning around over 20 moorings. We would do standard DBO measurements. You can see on the lines, and I can't show you my lines because you can't see my screen, but you can see if we were starting in Nome, we would go down to DBO 1 south of St. Lawrence Island. These are standard sites. Many have been seen for the last 30 years. DBO 2 in the Chirikov, DBO 3 at southeast, DBO moving up. You can see the lines on this graph. Thank you, Ann. And then doing DBO, some lines that are included in the EcoFOCI. There would be both field sampling, mooring turnaround. You can see the standard measurements on the left of that slide. And there would also be, we'd be doing, looking at some experiments, and there'd be seabird surveys done on this cruise. So still moving forward on that. And Phyllis is the contact for the, at PMEL for the current work. And I would be chief scientist on this. Next. I would just put these up there. We had an Arctic Science Summit Week virtually about 10 days ago, I believe, and they're still planning the Koreans to go in July and August. They would be mainly focusing going up to the Chukchi borderland areas. They would occupy the DBO3. They're looking at physics, biochemical, and biological measurements, looking at decline of sea ice. They also would be looking at having some sea ice camps. They would be, and you can see the lines. Some of them are actually the beginnings of the Synoptic Arctic Survey, those 2 yellow lines coming off into IC1 and IC2. Those are their ice camps there. There's still plans for them to go forward. Whether or not they stop at all in Alaska, they have the capability to come in and out of the Pacific Arctic sector without that, but I haven't heard anything more as of today, but I will try to get some feedback on that more. But right now, that cruise is going forward. Next. So this is the Japanese cruise. The next one is on the Mirai, and that was planned for September and October. They incorporate DBO 1, 2, 3, and 5 in their efforts. Then they're moving up with a lot of work up by in the Chukchi borderland, also part of going into the basin as part of the Synoptic Arctic Survey efforts that are the 2020-2021 period. You can see all the different contacts and all the observations on that slide. So these slides can be posted wherever you're planning to put them to give an idea. And they're also shared with the Alaska Eskimo Walrus Commission and the Arctic Waterway Safety Committee for discussions around sampling pre-closure on the COVID-19 activities. Next. And I think that's, this is the Canadian Joint Ocean Ice Study Beaufort Gyre Observatory. That is planned in for the fall. My understanding is the Louis St. Laurent is still a go for that. How far they would get and close to the to Utqiagvik was discussions that were ongoing before everything was closed down. That planning would is continuation of that observatory with all the temperature, hydrography measurements, nutrients, zooplankton, and they're also looking at some of the contaminant impacts from the Fukushima activities. So next. then finally, that was just, so then conclusions, you can look at these different websites on that, and I can provide, if we do this on a more regular basis, any updates on those particular cruises. There is a cruise table that I decided not to put up here because so many cancellations are occurring, but I will update that table and can provide that information to this group as soon as I get more information for the internationals, as well as whatever comes out of this meeting.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Next we have Seth Danielson.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I've just got just one slide here. I don't have any moorings in the Bering Sea right now. And this is mostly sort of a scoping slide. We are planning for some future glider deployments in the Bering Sea. There's a couple there that you can see listed under the mission planning that will be happening in 2021 and 2022. We have interest in getting a glider into the Bering Strait region and picking it up near Barrow Canyon, as we have done for from 2014 through 2018 with our whale acoustics glider. But right now we don't see a clear pathway to getting that deployed and recovered. So the field plans for this year are a little bit on hold, you know, pending future changes in our accessibility to the villages. So that's that. This is mostly just a slide to get you on or get us on your radar, and note that if you've got a cruise going, I'm taking notes here and maybe in contact with you. We've already been talking with AFSC about possibilities, and we'll continue having those discussions. Thanks.
Anne, can I just add something to Seth? Is that his Chukchi Environmental Observatory mooring would be turned around on the Fairweather cruise in August if that goes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and this is Molly McCammon, and just wanted to add that these new opportunities for the Bering Sea Glider is the result of additional funding put in by Congress to fill the gaps in ocean observing, and Alaska's part of that. And so I just want to thank our congressional delegation, and I know we have some staff on the phone here today, for their support for this, because I think this is really providing great opportunities for us.
Next we have Katie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Kathy LaFay, and I'm just going to do everybody's already talked about all these cruises. I'm just going to tell you what we're doing from the HABs and Arctic food webs perspective. So we have a large project, and we're looking at all ocean waters around Alaska that we can. So here is a list of the cruises that people have already talked about these. But before the closure, we packed for all of these cruises. We did all of the sample requests. We got all of the approvals. We have we even made labels, all the labels. Anyway, it's all packed up. We've got, I think, 11 cruises listed here. The Healy's been canceled. I think Don Anderson will talk more about that. Some of these other, the Ice Seal, etc. But you can see in the second column what samples we were ready to get from all of these cruises. And so I just want to put the plug in that for this project, any samples we get, we can use. So that's okay, and we'll be ready for next year. And I'll just, I guess, go to the next slide real quick. Just as a reminder of what this project is, it's a huge collaboration with all of many people on this call, the Alaska Fisheries Science Center. Bob Foy talks about many of the cruises that we're utilizing for these samples with those teams. And the goal is to develop a quantitative model for algal toxin transfer in food webs and the health impacts to fish and marine mammals. And just to say, last year was a colossal effort as well. We had a very warm year. We got out on 9 cruises. Help with all of the folks on this call. So we have those samples. 40% of them have been analyzed. We're still working with those. We can still start this project even if we can't get out there this summer. it would be great if we could, because the ocean conditions are different this year, and it's going to be really valuable to have different conditions for our sampling between years. But as a reminder, the ultimate goal of this project is to develop a model that will tell us at what harmful algal bloom densities do we start to see toxin levels in the food web that cause health impacts to fish and marine mammals. And so that's what we're working toward by getting all these pieces of the food web. And this is just sort of that overview of the collaborative team that's involved in that.
Thank you. All right, next we have Jim.
Hey everyone, this is Jim Thompson. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So the project that we have a cruise on this year is still happening as planned right now. I just had a email thread with Doug Baird from Alaska Fairbanks about the Schooliac operations. They expect to start operating again in July, and so our October 2020 cruise is still planned. This is a project on coastal dynamics in the Arctic, jointly funded by NSF and by ONR. It's a 3-week-long cruise, nominally departing Nome at the beginning of October and then returning close to the end of October. We have 3 focus sites pretty close to the coast. Those are 1, 2, 3 in the orange, yellow, orange, and pink. That's at Icy Cape, at the Jones Islands, and at Flaxman Island. So we're pretty far north of the Bering Sea, but I thought everyone would want to know about it. You can also see our track line in green, so we're trying to avoid working near all of the communities for a variety of reasons. We also will have some other folks on board the cruise. This is Bernie Coakley and others. They are doing a marine geology project they call CASE, and they have 7 days funded as part of this. So we're sharing the ship for this, and that'll be mostly along the Beaufort continental slope. So that green line is somewhat, captures all of those activities as well. I would say the big impact we're seeing right now from the coronavirus is just that we're really not able to do our outreach efforts. So this project included a lot of time spent up in the villages, mostly in the springtime, doing work in the schools and doing community meetings in the evenings, and understanding what kind of coastal change the communities are seeing and how our work ties into that. And we're not able to do that right now. So I see that as a big, a big problem, even though our cruise is still going to go forward. And the other thing I would say is, Seth, we probably could be your recovery for your glider if you wanted. We'll certainly be around Barrow Canyon or off in the distance in October. So if you're able to get it out, we could recover it for you. And I don't think you'd need a berth or anything to do that. In terms of other ancillary work, we're probably going to be pretty full. I don't think we'll have a lot of empty berths, but always happy to hear from people if they think there's something they want to add on to this cruise. We'll try to make it happen. Over.
Jim, thanks. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, thank you for that update. On. There we go. Okay, Rebecca.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. So this is our annual Bering Strait mooring cruise. It's usually Nome to Nome, and our target dates this year is 6th of September to the 16th of September. We plan to use the Norseman 2 as we've done in several years, and I think probably most of you know that she's now moved from Norseman charters to SVA. We have 3 moorings which we've had out in the Strait since 1990, and they're showing increasing flow, warming, and very interesting freshening in the Strait. So we want to keep those being turned around if we can, and then we run as many CTD casts as we can. This shows you the scope of the lines that we've run. Currently, we are watching and waiting, hoping things will be all right, but obviously Nome is not accepting in outsiders. Gay can fill more details on that. So that's obviously a concern to us, and we're thinking what contingency plans we might have. Our shipping date for Nome would be the middle of June, so we have a little bit of time, and I'm very curious as to what other people are planning in terms of ports and how you get people to them safely and things like that. Seth, we could certainly put your glider out if we were there. Happy to do that again. And we have spare berths generally on this cruise. social distancing may change that a little bit, but generally we have spare berths on this cruise for observers. We don't tend to take water, we just fly a CTD, but we could do some surface bucket samples, things like that. So
Great, thank you for that update. Next we have Bob Picard.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so this is a cruise that's going to be following the one that Jim Thompson talked about. It's part of my AON project where I've had a mooring on the Beaufort slope more or less continually since about 2002. So the main purpose of this cruise is to service that mooring. And you can see in the picture in the lower right there, that's where the mooring is off the Beaufort slope. And in addition to that, we do a survey of the boundary current system and typically go in far enough east into Canadian waters. So, you know, I don't think I need to read the hypothesis here, but in terms of the approach, again, it's a 25-day cruise on the Sakuliak. It tentatively is going from the 24th of October to the 17th of November. You can see the types of things that we do on it. Much like Rebecca, after the mooring work, we do a lot of high-resolution CTD sections. We do have a good number of ancillary projects on the cruise. You can read these here. We have, and some of these are funded through the AON project. We have underway biogeochemistry. We have some HABs work that will be done. This was also done 2 years ago on the same cruise. We have a microstructure component, cetacean monitoring, and we have a sort of biogeochemistry multi-tracer sampling effort, ocean acidification, seabirds and marine mammal observers. We'll do some float and drifter work. And then finally, there's a component that's doing a Mackenzie Canyon survey. So we will be pretty full, a lot of different things going on. And just like Jim said, I did talk to Doug Baird the other day, and as of right now, the cruise is still scheduled to go, pretty much in the time frame that it originally was going to happen. And I've listed some of the impacts down there below, which are certainly not unique to this cruise. One of the biggest issues we have right at the moment is, you know, we haven't been able to fabricate the mooring yet because we don't have access to our lab, but hopefully that will happen in the not too distant future. But again, like Rebecca was saying, we're supposed to be gnome to gnome. So, you know, we have the same issues as everyone else. So, you know, I guess we'll all stay tuned. And that's about it, Ann.
Thank you. Is Donald gonna represent or present on the second slide?
I guess Don's here and I call, he can chime in, but you know, I put together the slide, so I'll probably go ahead and talk about that as well. So the slide has the same format as the one before, so you're used to it. So this is a joint physical biological field program to study harmful algal blooms. And it's been a bit frustrating. We were slated to go in summer of 2019, and the schedule was such that we couldn't get out during the time of year that we needed to be, because we really want to get out there when the warmest water is present in the Chukchi Sea. So, you know, late July into August or early September. So we couldn't go in 2019, and, you know, now in 2020, we have just a small little global pandemic. So as you can see down at the very bottom, and it's already been mentioned on this phone call, the cruise actually has been postponed. So it's officially off the books for this summer. But just to say, you know, a little bit about the cruise, which, you know, we certainly hope is going to happen at some point. It's about 25 days long. And you can see again down in the lower right, that's a tentative cruise track, gnome to gnome. So we would be working from north to south. And the green lines that are highlighted there are DBO lines. So we'll do, you know, essentially DBO lines 1 through 6. We'll do water sample measurements, you know, CTD, Niskin sampling. And then in the benthos, we'll do a combination of Van Veen grabs, multi-core, and gravity core. I did want to point out that it is our plan to do adaptive sampling based on what we see. So if, you know, if there is bloom activity, we will alter this plan that you see on the map there and you know, sample the bloom appropriately. So, you know, that's something that we're poised to do at any moment. And the other neat thing about this is that we're going to try to use a Healy small boat to try to get some measurements very close to shore. So we have a little mini CTD and a little mini bottom grab and a little mini zooplankton net that we will use on a small boat to try to get right up to the beach. And, you know, I just sort of listed 3 potential places that we would do that, for instance, in Kotzebue Sound. But, you know, that will also be somewhat adaptive as well. So this cruise, we've been planning it for a long time, as I said. It's got a lot of ancillary components to it. Some of them, you know, fully funded through NSF, NOAA, maybe a few of them bootleg, but a big number of projects. So you can see the list here, multi-tracer biogeochemistry. Bob Foy mentioned the NOAA component, mesozooplankton larval fish. We have ocean acidification. Stanford is doing a nitrogen dynamics component. Again, seabird, marine mammal observers, an atmospheric component funded through NSF, and we'll also do some floats and drifters. We had a lot of outreach planned, including a Polar Tech teacher. And down below, the same set of impacts I just mentioned. And so, except one different one, because we're on the Healy rather than the Sikuliak. So the Healy, they had their shakedown cruise that's, you know, typically, I think it was going to be scheduled for a couple of weeks from now. And they're just not going to be able to do that at this point because, you know, one of the reasons is the Stark technicians can't even get on the vessel to make sure the scientific instrumentation is working properly. So there was a whole chain of things that were just going to fall apart. So NSF, Coast Guard, and Don and I jointly made the decision that it made great sense to postpone this. So the good news is that at this point, we are tentatively scheduled to be on the Healy next summer in the same time frame. So we hope that that will come to pass. Okay.
Thank you so much for the update.
Yep.
We only have a couple more slides left, so let's try and get through those fast so we can have a little bit more time for discussion. The next is Phyllis. We cannot hear you.
Okay, I think it works now.
No, we can.
Okay, there's 3 slides here. They've all been discussed a bit. The first slide is the EcoFOCI Spring Mooring Cruise, which is an OAR Fisheries collaboration. It usually has several university people on it doing extra work. It has been canceled. Probably some of the big implications is M2 for the first time in 27 years will not go in the water. The good news about M2, which is that it was deployed last fall, and so we'll continue to get some sampling throughout this year. We will not get CO2. We will not deploy bag samplers for eDNA, etc. So that is gone. The M4 mooring was also to be redeployed because we didn't do it last year because we had insufficient ship time. So this one is gone. Next slide. This is Jackie Grebmeyer already talked about this cruise. This is the Fairweather. We are continuing to prepare for this cruise. At the moment, the Fairweather is sitting at the Sand Point dock, which is where PMEL and AFSC is located, and we are prepping the ship for this cruise. My understanding at the moment, it'll be there until June 1st, and then there'll be a number of weeks used to prepare the ship for sail. It's highly unlikely, as Jackie said, there'll be nome to nome, and the dates might very well change. The ship is full. We don't have enough berths as it is, so there's no space. But if it goes, there's a lot of sampling to be done and a lot of water to be collected, and we can probably collect other water. Next slide. This is the final EcoFOCI cruise of the year. This is the mooring cruise. At the moment, it's still scheduled. This is a critical cruise for us. All the moorings are to be redeployed and turned around. There's a lot of sampling and that type of thing. As I say, at the moment, we're prepared. This cruise is also full, but we'll probably end up doing some other moorings that Fisheries has in the water if it goes, because that Fisheries cruise may not occur. So in general, that's it. Any questions?
Great, thank you. All right, Kathy.
Hello, this is Kathy Kulis. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Basically, I just wanted to let you know that we're still planning on joining those cruises that are ongoing here. I don't show my image with the video. Are you able to pick me up?
We can see your screen. I mean,
Okay. At any rate, so I oversee many of the seabird surveys that are conducted on these various cruises. This is a rather abbreviated season this year, not just because of COVID-19, but also because one of the two BOEM interagency agreements that support our work, the final field season was last year, so we're operating under the last remaining one, and this is the last year for that interagency agreement. So these are the cruises that we were scheduled to go on this year. We're still planning, except for, of course, the ones that were canceled. And it's possible, I suppose, if there were space availability on some of the others later in the season, if some of these early cruises do get canceled, then we'd welcome some information on the available berth space on those. Just mentioned in particular, I'm interested in the Jim Thompson's cruise on the Sekuliak in October, near coast. It sounds like that's already pretty full. And then Rebecca Woodgate's in the Bering Strait region in September. So if you have any questions, be glad to answer.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Those were all the presentations that we had. Did anyone not forward any of the slides, or has any updates on any other cruises that were not included in here?
Yeah, Christine, this is Craig Lee from UW. I have a quick update for the Healy cruises. Just go ahead.
Yeah.
So Healy, after the cruises for Bob that had been canceled, had scheduled some work for 1 hour for the Arctic Mobile Observing System and the acoustics program. Those were originally scheduled to be 2 separate cruises. We've been going round and round about this, trying to plan around COVID-19 mitigation measures and try to minimize risk. So the current scenario, with an understanding that we want to stay out of the northern communities during this time, and looking at the Coast Guard's ability to accept risk, is to go Seattle to Seattle, departing in mid-August and coming back in late October for a 70-day cruise with no port calls, 1 long leg. Other scenarios might be possible depending on what happens with the pandemic, right? How comfortable the northern communities become with having people passing through, what travel restrictions are in Alaska going into the summer, and what air travel looks like, what ability to reach these places becomes. But the primary tasks there are mooring recoveries and service for Caddis Amos, glider deployments, deployments of a couple of clusters of ice-based instruments, and then some technology testing for autonomous vehicles, navigation, and communications. There might be time for some secondary efforts. Time will probably be fairly tightly constrained, but we could probably entertain doing some things. Seth, for example, we would be passing through the Bering Strait at a time that might be attractive to deploy your gliders. So that might be something we could talk about, if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're a little behind schedule. I want to ask Gay to talk a little bit about updates from the Nome region, and then we're gonna hopefully have a little bit of time for discussion, and the modeling sub-team had some inputs as well. So, okay.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody. So here we go. So first off is the COVID situation in this region. We do have our first confirmed COVID case. We have some authority in the region to set stricter mandates and our regional smaller communities are shut down. For example, normally Nome would have 14 passenger flights per week. We currently have 5, and we will be reducing that to 3. Cargo is still coming. We have very limited medical supplies. And I guess I have a question for the leadership, like Bob Foy. The state mandates research is not considered essential, and I don't know why that is. Right now, the ports have to allow and communities have to allow people in that are providing an essential service. So right now that is mining and commercial fishing and also subsistence. I would think that it might help you all if that somehow at the high leadership level in the state that marine research would also be considered essential. It may actually give you guys a little more wiggle room with communities. Currently, communities pretty much, if you are not deemed essential, right now you need, prior to your arrival, 72 hours before your arrival to Nome, just as an example of what Nome is doing, other communities are doing other things. You need to have travel authorization from the city of Nome. You have a mandatory 2-week quarantine if you are not essential. And that's how it's going to roll. The port will remain closed in Nome until June 1. St. Paul has closed the port, I think, pretty much for the summer, except for state and federal vessels. And also if you're offloading snow crab, I think is the gist. Bob, you probably know more about that. It would be very helpful if you are bringing your ship to Nome. The commercial fishing industry is trying to be more transparent about their protocols for avoiding contamination or bringing COVID in. I recommend that if your ship or if your vessel has or your project has COVID plans, if you are coming to a community, provide them in advance. Either go through the regional hub entities like Sea Grant or whoever you normally work with, and get those out to either the people that work in outreach and communications, and also the port directors and harbor masters. Know that it would not be a good idea to even try to stop at any of the small communities in the Bering Strait region. You will be seen as a medical threat. So people will not want, I know sometimes boats stop and do outreach with the communities. That is not recommended this year due to our medical supply situation and the logistics here. This is an awesome opportunity for everyone to get ready for 2021 regarding outreach and regarding working with communities and integrating with the hubs and the regional communication networks. Again, I would recommend working on those, and you'd probably have no problem going into 21. If you are coming in 2020, there's some names here that I just popped up that I wasn't aware that's coming to Nome, so I look forward to seeing if you're able to come. Do keep in touch regarding your ship scheduling. If it changes, it will be good for the region to know that, and also stay in touch because our resolutions may change and also state mandates may change. I'm just speaking for Nome. Unalaska has probably, I know they have a different situation going on there, but they also have, anyway, they have a different situation with their communities and Unalaska. That's kind of it. Quickly, I know we're trying to move along.
Thank you so much for that. That gives us a little bit more insight into how you're coping with the situation. So next we have a little bit of time for discussion. So if anyone has any questions, please speak up or drop something in the chat box and I'll read it for people to answer. As you get prepared to answer or ask any questions, if you have any berthing space on any of the cruises that are still planning to happen, please send me an email, let me know. There's multiple Knaus fellows that are interested, and I'm sure there's other people too, but I'm speaking for Knaus fellows right now, that are really interested in joining those cruises and get some cruise experience. So if you have any berthing space and need extra hands, let me know. Okay.
And I've got a comment.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Ann. So just a couple of comments on some things. I heard one. I want to second what Gay said about having guidelines and protocols before you even think about doing research in Alaskan waters this year. And I strongly recommend that folks look towards the commercial fishing industry. If you don't have those connections, or if your vessels do not have protocols already, I'd be glad carefully to be a point of contact for you, and I can share what we're putting together. But it is based on the commercial fishing industry, and then we've augmented it for our research applications. It's quite extensive in terms of what the recommendations are, and it is all related to the state's shelter in place and quarantine and travel policies. So right now we have about 120 observers in the field that we work with that are out on the commercial boats. So we kind of play a quasi role there in helping make sure that they're following the commercial fishing protocols. And then again, we're also working with the fleet because of these surveys that are coming up. Secondarily, back to your, or I think it was your point, Gay, on some of these travel exemptions. We do have federal travel exemption to work within the state of Alaska. I assume that applies to all of us, but we sought that out because we've been continuing to conduct research and move people as we had to, again, respecting the state travel and the regional and local travel restrictions, quarantining when necessary, you know, contacting the right people, etc. But we're free to travel with those exceptions, with those caveats. And also anything associated with the fishing industry and support for the fishing industry has those exemptions. So we also fit in that category. So that might apply to some folks here as well, and especially those that are working on NOAA vessels. That's all I've got.
Thank you. There's one question from Betsy, which is, will there be a coordinated update to the communities about the kinds of information shared here? For example, cancellations, vessel COVID plans, and looking towards 2021.
This is Molly. I guess this is a community question, because I know there is a process already in place for the Waterway Safety Committee for the conflict avoidance protocols and agreements that have been signed, and we don't want to overlap or duplicate. So what, and I don't know if it's Bob or Candace Nachman or someone who's involved directly with that, what would be the recommendation? Because we could take all of this, put it into a document, do a weekly update, have it posted in lots of different places. Is that useful? Or is it duplicating something that's already being done? That's my question. Okay, Bob, I'm asking you.
Yeah, okay. I was hoping Candace was going to jump in there on that. So I think we are beyond the formal constructs right now in terms of engagement with the communities. Because of this epidemic, I would say that we need to go, again, beyond those formal constructs. They don't include this. So I think whatever we can get from the communities, as you said, to provide us some guidance on contacts. Gay, your comments were great. But having very specific information from each community would be good. When we first started working in Dutch Harbor, you know, we're calling everybody till we finally found the people that were appropriate to make sure that we're being respectful of the community issues. So, you know, I would say that at this point, this year is unique. We're starting from scratch. We won't go anywhere near Northwest communities right now until we're broadening those discussions. And I would just suggest that none of us presume that formal constructs that are in place apply right now. Doesn't exactly answer your question, Molly, but I think that, you know, it's some of our engagement even in Southeast Alaska has been problematic. And it really does go beyond any kind of formal or previous MOUs that we had.
Well, I guess I could commit on the behalf of the IARPIC EI team, collaboration team, and also the new project that ACE is starting their the Bering Ocean Data Sharing Initiative, and Jill Pruitt is online, and she's our new hire on that. We could commit to working jointly together to get an updated cruise and keep it updated on a weekly basis, and establish a certain number of places where it will be posted and available to the public. So we can commit to doing that, I'm sure, at the very minimum. And we can work with Gay and others as other places, and Julie Raymond, I see you're on too from Quirk, to look at other places where this could be posted as well. That is something at a minimum that we can do.
Yeah, I would hope, this is Gay in Nome. I would hope that everybody be working with the regions throughout this process, not just having a thing that's getting shared later. That's that integration with the regional hub entities such as Coeric, Sea Grant, and others. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Craig Lee had a comment.
Yeah, just with respect to risk assessment and mitigation protocols for the research vessels. UNOLS recently, over the past month, has invested quite a bit of work in putting together a series of documents that have been associated with the initial 30-day pause and then the stand down to 1 July for the research fleet. But if they are helpful and they're actually meant to be used as a guideline for the academic research fleet, they are posted on the UNOLS site. So it's a set of risk assessment guidelines and a set of suggestions for mitigation approaches.
That's great, thanks.
Sarah, it would be helpful if you could post that on our site too, just then it's a link there as well, just a link to the UNOLS. Thank you.
Yeah, if you can post that, then I'll put it in the comments on the event page later when I update that, so everyone has it available.
Will do. I'll put a link up on the chat here.
Thank you. All right, okay, there's no other comments as I can see, so I would ask the modeling team to take over for a couple minutes and update us on, or give us an insight into what they want to do.
And before we do that, could I
Yeah.
just so there's several different teams here looking at ways we could get science teams onto ships in the region, and I think coordination of that would also be helpful in some way, and maybe Julie's document will address that, but rather than each of us trying to find our own solution of a different port or how we'd quarantine in Nome or things like that, it'd be nice to have some sort of centralized discussion group or something that we could work together in that, rather than each of us trying to flap around and find our own.
All do it on their own.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any comments or suggestions for this right now?
Rebecca, this is Gay. Are you looking at other ports besides Nome?
I haven't even thought that far.
Okay, well,
I heard people mention Kodiak. That's all. I hadn't even thought about Kodiak.
Again, maybe you and I can talk offline, because there are people that have this information. They work with their communities, and they're part of the NOAA group. So I think it's there's not that many ports in Nome right now, at least for. Anyway, I won't get into it. Let's talk later. Thank you. Okay,
that'd be great. And another concern that I have is if Nome was shut to ports, yet there's a medical emergency on a ship, is it possible to even predict whether Nome would take a person who is ill off a ship in Nome or not?
So this is Gay. By international law, you cannot, a ship in distress, you cannot turn away. So no, the port will not be closed for the summer, at least right now, but it won't be open until June 1. At sea issues, there's protocols that ships will know what to do regarding contacting the U.S. Coast Guard. There's also coming into Nome, we've got just last week, risk management. U.S. Coast Guard is now finally talking with our medical director here at the Norton Sound Health Corporation. So in the event of ships coming in, which they may be especially since we have large processors that will be in the area for months, and other vessels. So there are protocols in place. And yes, there's medical attention here, and there are ways to deal with that. People are planning on that. Thank you.
Okay, it'd be great to chat. We'll chat offline. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna give it over to Wilbur to give you some updates.
All right, thanks very much, Anne. And also for the community. This is a very, very fascinating session so far. As a physical oceanographer and a modeler, I'm a co-lead of the modeling sub-team, which is part of the Environmental Intelligence Collaboration Team. It's a little bit sad to see all these cruises being canceled and all this observational activity being put on hold. But as Molly said, I mean, there's a lot of data that is out there that can still be analyzed. But as a modeling sub-team representative, I also want to put in a plug for modeling capabilities that are available in our community to address the questions that are of interest to you. And so we asked Wisla Matlowski from Naval Postgraduate School, and he's running the RASM team, the Regional Arctic System Model, to present a couple of slides to advertise the capabilities that they bring to bear to problems like these. So can we share Wisla's screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me first?
Yes.
Okay, can you see my screen?
No.
Okay.
So if you go.
How about now?
Yes. Now we can see it.
Thank you. And how much time I get? 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, keep it a little bit under. Maybe try to keep it at 5 if you can.
Okay, so I'll probably skip some slides. But the bottom line is that, as Wilbert said, this is just a kind of like a review of mostly DOE supported and ONR, Navy, DOE type effort that has been going on for some time. The project is a regional Arctic system model, but I'll have slide hopefully at the end that will provide some outlook for a global modeling with the focus on the Bering Sea region. Basically, the idea is that the regional model we have, it's a regional version of the climate system model like NCAR, CSM, or many other models. And we have regional focus on the Arctic with atmosphere and sea and land at either 50 or 25 kilometers, and the ocean and sea ice either 9 kilometer or 2.4 kilometer. And we have different configurations. The schematic that I'm showing in the lower right is basically giving you some idea how this coupled system is put together. So we have regional components of all different climate system models: atmosphere, ocean, sea ice, land hydrology, stream flow, and marine biogeochemistry as well, and they are forced by external boundary conditions. So just one thing to show is that from a model like this, you can have a picture of a large-scale circulation, which is focusing here on the Bering Sea. You can see the connection from the Gulf of Alaska across the deep Bering, the Bering Shelf, Bering Strait, into the Chukchi, into the Western Arctic. And then we've done quite a bit of work going back probably 15 or so years ago, looking at the Bering Strait transport, which is the time series of the volume transport, which I'm showing here on the left. The Bering Strait is at the top, and then we have Alaskan Stream, another stream, Spanberg Stream, another current, and the section South Lawrence Island here. Later on, we had put together a number of models worked by Jackie Clementini mostly, where we evaluated multiple models in terms of the communication through Bering Strait and compared with Rebecca's Moorings A2 and A3 shown here in terms of the velocity represented in models relative to observations. There's some uncertainty with observational, but you can see the models provide quite a bit of spread. The bottom line here, or kind of one of the messages, is that the coarser resolution model had a harder time to represent the transport across Bering Strait and narrower shallow region. So more observations are critical for us. And what's been done by Rebecca and her team is very, very important in terms of forcing the Pacific inflow into the Western Arctic. And the idea is that we need those observations continued, not only in the Bering Strait, but also upstream possibly, as well as downstream. What I hear Bob Picard is doing is with his team, the DBO observations and so forth. One thing that I wanted to say with the model is that you can clearly see from this picture, this is paper by Jackie back from 2005, comparing 1999 and 2001 observations. You can see a quite significant difference in ice cover in the month of February 1999 on the left, 2001 on the right. The top panels are observations, the bottom panels are model simulations. And basically the lower panels here show that all these conditions with not any type of global warming or something. The winds were quite significant different at that time in 2001, and they were favorable to removing a lot of ice in the northern Bering Sea. So if you don't have good winds in your model simulations, you probably will not have a good sea ice conditions, the physics, circulation, and then its effect and impact on the biology and the productivity there. What we have now is that with the extension of the RASM, Regional Arctic System Model, with the marine biogeochemistry, both in the sea ice and ocean, I'm showing you one example of the results that Jackie Clement is working on a manuscript in preparation now. We can compare the surface chlorophyll concentration in those 2 years, 1999 and 2001. It's a hindcut simulation. In but if you can see in May between 2001 and 1991, there is an effect of the retreat of the sea ice between the 2001 and 1999. As you go to June, past the spring bloom in May, I guess, the conditions are kind of like interannual variability. The main thing here is that we can have the high resolution simulations of the physics, fully coupled atmosphere, land, ice, ocean simulations, which are coupled to the marine biogeochemistry and ecosystem simulation. This plot here is showing, Jackie just prepared this, and this is part of her another paper in preparation, looking at the cold pole in the Bering Sea, comparing the early, basically, like you can call it a healthy conditions in the Bering Sea, where you had a cold pole region down the bottom with the temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius all the way through the summer. Those are the upper panels. This is a model simulations of the temperature near the bottom. And if you look at the 2018 conditions from the same simulations, the cold pool basically almost doesn't exist during that time. And on the lower right panel, I'm showing the observational estimates from the NDS and SEBS summertime bottom temperatures, showing that, showing that the nearby the date line, you might have some water lower than 2 degrees centigrade near the bottom, which is in agreement with what we're showing in the model, but basically there was not much of a cold pool in the recent time. So the idea is that with this kind of modeling capability, we can look at not only the general circulation from the Pacific across the Bering to the Arctic, but we can also focus on specific issues of relevance to marine productivity, sea ice conditions, and so forth. I want to just briefly say that RASM team has been doing since 2019 January monthly probabilistic forecast out to 6 months prediction. This is work supported by the Office of Naval Research in particular. And every month we initialize order of 28 to 31 ensemble members and run those ensemble members initialize on the same date, such as March 1, 2020, for 6 months out. And we have been focusing on the sea ice conditions. To 2 panels on the right are showing the probability of the end of May, 31st May 2020, probability of ice concentration greater than 15%, your typical ice extent conditions. And this is a probability based on the 31 ensemble members, and then probability of ice graded concentration than 85%. We have been thinking about including the history in this forecast. I would be looking for any feedback from people who might be interested if this would be of any relevance to have predictions of, say, spring bloom out to 6 months out with a forecast like this. And finally, I want to finish out that as a joint effort, the Highlight Rassen team, funded by Department of Energy, Renew Joseph project, we've been developing capability to focus on the Pan-Arctic region, high latitudes, with a global grid and the refinement in the high latitudes. I'm showing you a case of global resolution of 60 kilometer refined to 6 kilometer into the Pan-Arctic region. The upper panels are September and March 1983 sea ice concentration, and the bottom panels are showing September SST on the lower right and September surface currents on the lower right, on the bottom right, as an example of this new capability. We are still learning how to use this model. This model has the capability to include the biogeochemistry as well. So this is a potential new effort through the Highlight Rassen project that might be of relevance not only with a focus on the Bering Sea, but also looking for connection from the North Pacific across the Bering Sea and into the Arctic. And I'll stop here and be happy to answer any questions.
All right, wonderful, great. Thanks very much, Wisław. I'll hand it over to Anne. I think we're running a little bit out of time, but feel free to get in touch with Wisław or myself or other modeling team members to follow up on this. Thank you very much.
And if you're comfortable sharing the slides, you can forward them to me and I can post them online so everyone can access the information.
I'll be happy to share most of them except those in preparation.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to invite all the team leads to give us some closing remarks and next steps. If you have anything to say to close off the session, I will start with Molly.
I want to thank everybody for being online here. I guess the next steps would be, one, I really, again, as at the beginning, challenge you all, if your cruise has been delayed, postponed, canceled, are there additional activities that could be done this year? Do you have additional funds sitting there unspent that could be used for something else? And think about that and try to get in touch with other folks that you've heard today. So I think that's number one. Number two, we will take upon ourselves to follow up and to develop with other IARPC folks a cruise status report and keep that updated on at least a bi-weekly or weekly basis, kind of an as-needed basis. And we'll, based on Rebecca Woodgate's suggestion, include something about what kind of the planning scenarios, what the cruises are thinking about for planning scenarios, so that others, if they might want to tag on to that planning scenario as well, could look to that. So we will do that as an update, as a follow-up. So, and I guess the third thing is, we are working with UAF and to put together a report to go out to Bering Sea communities that will be an update of what happened kind of biologically and with sea ice and physically last year, kind of what the winter sea ice conditions were like, what we think the summer is going to be like. And that is being put together now. It will likely be done in early May and will be sent out and distributed widely. So we've reached out to a number of you for input into that. It will go out for a lot of peer review before it goes out, but just wanted to let you know that's in the works. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Jackie, you want to go next?
I just say that I thought this, thank you for putting this together, and Molly combining it with the multiple collaborative teams and also having the modeling on there. I think it is an example of how we could bring do this with some of the results that come in, even and then how it could interface with the modeling, something that we in the Marine Collaborative team have really been pushing on. I think that's great, and I like this idea not only of knowing what the scenarios are for the cruises, but also getting updates on what the level of the community interest or capability to get off of what sites maybe are more open up on one community versus the other. And this issue that Gabe brought up of being essential, I mean, we're considered unessential here in the state of Maryland, all research, except if it's COVID-19. So I think there is some some activities that we need to push forward for some of this that might help then the composite. So they're good points. So thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Jackie. Renee, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's presentations. We had the opportunity here to understand some of the opportunities that people have to share ship-going opportunities, data collection, water sharing, and that's a really important part of the field operations working group and these other working groups, so that researchers can leverage when we are able to get these assets out into the field or have large field campaigns. I think it's really notable to highlight that we can't do the kind of community outreach that we have for many, many years been encouraging our PI community to do. And so we need to adjust all of our methods of operating and interactions with communities accordingly, because normally we would be encouraging people to go and visit communities ahead of time, and that is totally off the table. So just keeping in mind what you can do to stay in touch with communities about your research, even if you're not planning to visit, it's an important part of what we're still trying to continue to do, even though communications have changed a bit. So keep in mind still staying in touch with those communities where your research has an impact on them and their subsistence species. Thank you, everyone, and I hope we get to do this again regularly and annually.
Thank you, Renee. Just to remind everyone, I took notes of the meeting and I will post them online, so all the meeting notes and presentations that we saw today will be available on the IRPIC website. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending and for giving us feedback and letting us get an idea of where you guys are at with cruise planning and what's changing in light of this pandemic. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and hope to see you all soon again.